What happens when Hollywood's toughest action hero faces off against late night's sharpest tongue in a battle that turned a talk show appearance into an all-out war? It only took 34 seconds for Sylvester Stallone to snap, unleash a verbal assault that left the entire studio in shock, and storm off Jimmy Kimmel Live in what might be the most explosive exit in late-night history. Before we dive into this absolute madness, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations they don't want you to see, and the drama that happens when the cameras keep rolling. Hit that subscribe button now, because you won't believe what went down last night. The tension in the studio was thick from the moment Sylvester Stallone walked onto that stage. You could see it in his eyes. The 78-year-old legend wasn't his usual charismatic self. There was something different about him, something angry. Jimmy Kimmel, ever the provocateur, seemed to sense blood in the water from the very first handshake. That smile he gave Stallone as they sat down? It wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who came prepared for battle. Jimmy started things off, asking Stallone about his latest project, a new action film that was supposed to celebrate his legacy in Hollywood. Stallone gave short answers, one-word responses. Yeah, sure. Fine. The audience could feel something was off. This wasn't the Sly they knew, the guy who usually lights up every interview with stories about Rocky and Rambo. This was a man on edge, a man barely containing something explosive beneath the surface. Then Jimmy made his first real jab. He brought up Stallone's age, joking about how most people his age are thinking about retirement homes, not throwing punches on camera. The audience laughed nervously. Stallone didn't laugh at all. He just stared at Jimmy, with those intense eyes that made him famous. You could see his jaw clench. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair a little tighter. The veins in his neck started to become visible. But Jimmy didn't stop there. He never does. He kept pushing, making jokes about how Stallone's recent films hadn't performed well at the box office. He mentioned the critical reviews, the flops, the projects that went straight to streaming. Each joke landed like a punch, and Stallone's face grew darker with every word. The audience's laughter became more uncomfortable, more forced. They could sense this was going somewhere bad, somewhere dangerous. Stallone finally spoke up, his voice low and controlled, the way it gets right before an explosion. He told Jimmy that he didn't come on the show to be disrespected, that he'd been in this business for 50 years and earned his place. His words were measured, but his eyes were fire. Jimmy, thinking he was still in control of the situation, laughed it off. He said he was just joking, that this was all in good fun, that Stallone needed to lighten up. That was a mistake, a huge mistake. The veteran actor leaned forward in his chair, his voice getting louder. "You have no idea what it takes to do what I do," Stallone said. "The training, the sacrifice, the physical toll. You sit behind a desk making jokes. That's easy. Actually putting yourself out there, actually creating something, that's hard." The audience went completely silent. You could hear every breath in that studio. Jimmy's smile faltered for just a second, but he recovered quickly. Jimmy tried to steer the conversation somewhere safer. He asked Stallone about his family, about his wife and daughters. It seemed like a safe topic, a way to cool things down and get back to normal late-night banter. But Stallone cut him off immediately. "We're not talking about my family," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. "My personal life is off limits. That was agreed upon before I even came on this show. Stick to what we talked about, Jimmy." The host looked surprised. He wasn't used to guests pushing back like this. "Wow, okay," Jimmy said with a nervous laugh. "Someone's a little sensitive tonight. You're here to promote a movie, Sly, but you're acting like you don't even want to be here." The audience gave an uncomfortable laugh. Stallone's face turned red. His famous muscles tensed up under his jacket. This was about to get very ugly, very fast. That's when Jimmy made his biggest mistake. Either not reading the room or deliberately poking the bear one more time, he brought up Stallone's past in detail. He mentioned the failed marriages, calling them by name. He brought up the box office bombs from the 80s and 90s, rattling off titles like he was reading from a list. He talked about the times when Hollywood had written Stallone off as washed up, has-been, finished. He framed it as a compliment, saying how impressive it was that Stallone had bounced back from those dark periods. But the way he said it, with that smirk on his face, made it clear this was another attack disguised as praise. Stallone stood up, not slowly, not casually. He shot up out of his chair like he'd been ejected from it. The audience gasped collectively. Jimmy's smile finally disappeared completely. The band stopped playing. Everything in that studio came to a grinding halt as America watched Sylvester Stallone tower over Jimmy Kimmel's desk, his chest heaving, his fists clenched at his sides. "You've crossed the line," Stallone said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "You're a bully, Jimmy. A bully hiding behind comedy. You take cheap shots at people who come on your show trying to do their job, trying to promote their work, and you think it's funny. It's not funny. You're just being a dick." The audience gasped. Nobody knew how to react. Some people looked shocked. Others stayed completely silent. A few nervous laughs came from somewhere in the back. Jimmy tried to interrupt, tried to say something to defend himself. "Sly, come on, I'm just what?" Stallone cut him off. "Just joking? That's your defense? Making fun of someone's age isn't a joke, Jimmy. Making fun of their career struggles isn't a joke. Bringing up their personal life when they specifically told you not to isn't a joke. That's just you being an asshole for ratings." Jimmy stood up now too, trying to regain some control. "Everyone who comes on this show gets teased a little bit. That's the format. Tom Hanks gets teased. Meryl Streep gets teased. Everybody—" "Don't you dare," Stallone interrupted, pointing his finger at Jimmy. "Don't you dare compare what you did to them with what you're doing to me. You're treating me like a has-been. Like I'm some old fool who doesn't know any better. I've earned more respect than this." The camera zoomed in on both their faces. You could see the genuine anger in Stallone's eyes and the growing panic in Jimmy's. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't planned. This was real conflict playing out in real time on live television. "I've been in this business since before you were born," Stallone continued, his voice getting louder with each word. "I've created characters that will outlive both of us. Rocky, Rambo. Those aren't just movies, Jimmy. Those are cultural icons. What have you created? What's your legacy? Making fun of people? That's what you want to be remembered for?" Jimmy tried to defend himself. "I've built a successful show on the backs of people like me," Stallone shot back. "You need us more than we need you. I came here as a favor, to help promote a film that employs hundreds of people, good people with families who need this movie to succeed. And instead of being a professional, instead of doing your job, you decided to make me your punching bag for the night. Well, I'm not going to stand here and take it." The audience was completely silent now. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others were filming on their phones. Everyone could sense they were witnessing something historic, something that would be talked about for years. Jimmy's tone changed. He could see this was spiraling out of control. "Look, Sly, if I offended you, I apologize. But this is just how the show works. Everyone gets roasted a little bit. It's all in good fun. You're taking this way too seriously." That response made everything exponentially worse. Stallone's face went from red to almost purple. "Good fun?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You think this is fun? Being humiliated on national television is fun? Having my personal life dragged through the mud is fun? You have a twisted sense of humor, Jimmy." "I didn't drag anything through the mud," Jimmy protested. "I just brought up facts about your career." "Facts?" Stallone interrupted again. "You brought up my failures, my divorces, the lowest points of my life. And you did it with a smile on your face like it was all just entertainment. That's not journalism, Jimmy. That's not comedy. That's just cruelty." Jimmy tried another approach. "Sly, you're a tough guy. You've played some of the toughest characters in movie history. Why are you being so sensitive about a few jokes?" The studio audience audibly gasped at that question. Even they knew that was the wrong thing to say. Stallone's expression changed from anger to something colder, more controlled, somehow more frightening. "Tough guy?" Stallone said quietly. "You think being tough means letting people disrespect you? No, Jimmy. Being tough means knowing your worth and not letting anyone treat you like garbage. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm standing up for myself because nobody else is going to do it for me." "Come on," Jimmy said, trying to lighten the mood. We're both adults here. We can work this out. Why don't we take a commercial break and... No, Stallone said firmly. There's no commercial break that's going to fix this. You've shown me exactly who you are, Jimmy. You're someone who thinks tearing people down is the same as building yourself up. You're wrong, and I'm not going to be part of it anymore. Jimmy looked genuinely concerned now. His producers were probably screaming in his earpiece, trying to tell him how to salvage this disaster. Sly, please, let's just sit down and talk about your movie. That's why you're here, right? To promote the film? Stallone laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and cold. You really don't get it, do you? I don't care about promoting my movie anymore, not on your show. Not after this. The movie will be fine without your help. It might even be better without your help, considering how you've treated me tonight. You're being ridiculous, Jimmy said, and immediately regretted it. You could see it on his face the moment the words left his mouth. Ridiculous? Stallone repeated, his voice dangerous. I'll tell you what's ridiculous, Jimmy. What's ridiculous is that you think you can say whatever you want to whoever you want and hide behind the excuse of comedy. What's ridiculous is that you've built a career on being mean and calling it entertainment. What's ridiculous is that I wasted my time coming here thinking I'd be treated with basic human decency. The audience was completely frozen. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others just stared, unable to look away from this train wreck happening in front of them. Stallone continued, You know what the problem is with people like you? You've forgotten what respect means. Hollywood used to be about honoring the people who came before you, learning from the legends, building on their legacy. Now it's just about who can be the most shocking, who can get the most clicks, who can tear someone down the fastest for a viral moment. That's not fair, Jimmy tried to interject. You respect nothing. Stallone cut him off. If you had any respect for me, for my career, for everything I've accomplished, you wouldn't have ambushed me like this. You wouldn't have turned this interview into a roast that I never signed up for. You would have treated me like a professional, instead of like some washed-up punchline. Jimmy's face was getting red now, too. He was losing control of his own show, and he knew it. Look, if you can't handle a few jokes, maybe you shouldn't be doing publicity. Don't you dare, Stallone said, his voice like thunder. Don't you dare put this on me. I've done thousands of interviews. I've been on every talk show you can name. And I've never walked off a set before. Never. But you've pushed me too far, Jimmy. You've crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every eye in the studio was glued to these two men facing off. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this historic confrontation. You want to know something? Stallone said, his voice dropping to a menacing level. I came up in an era when your word meant something. When respect meant something. When you looked someone in the eye and treated them with dignity. That era is gone now. Replaced by people like you who think everything is fair game as long as it gets laughs. Jimmy tried once more to regain control. Sly, I think you're overreacting. Overreacting? Stallone exploded. You've insulted my career, my personal life, my age, everything about me, and I'm overreacting? No, Jimmy. I'm reacting exactly how I should. I'm standing up for myself. Something you clearly don't understand because you've never been on this side of the desk. You've never had to sit there while someone tears you apart for entertainment. The actor's hands were shaking now. Not from fear but from pure adrenaline and rage. You think you're clever, don't you? You think you're witty. But there's nothing clever about punching down, Jimmy. There's nothing witty about kicking someone when they're vulnerable. That's just being a coward with a microphone. Jimmy's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked genuinely shocked that this was happening. His usual quick wit had completely abandoned him. You want to talk about my age? Stallone continued. Fine. I'm 78 years old. And you know what I've learned in those 78 years? Life's too short to let people disrespect you. Life's too short to play nice with bullies. Life's too short to sit on a stage and take abuse from someone half my age who thinks he knows everything about the world. I never said I knew everything, Jimmy started. You don't have to say it, Stallone interrupted. It's written all over your face. That smug expression, that condescending tone. You think because you have a talk show, because you have an audience, that you're somehow above everyone else. You're not, Jimmy. You're not better than anyone who sits in that chair. And you're sure as hell not better than me. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Some people were nodding in agreement with Stallone. Others looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to be anywhere but in that studio right now. Stallone took a step back from the desk. You know what the sad part is? This could have been a good interview. We could have talked about the craft of filmmaking, about the new generation of action stars, about the evolution of cinema, about things that actually matter. Instead, you chose to make it personal. You chose to go for cheap laughs at my expense. And now you're going to have to live with the consequences. What consequences? Jimmy asked, his voice smaller now. The consequence that Sylvester Stallone walked off your show, the actor said simply. The consequence that one of Hollywood's biggest legends told you to your face that you crossed the line. The consequence that millions of people are watching right now and seeing exactly what kind of person you really are. Jimmy looked panicked. Sly, come on, don't do this. We can fix this. We can. There's nothing to fix, Stallone said flatly. You revealed your true colors tonight, Jimmy. And I'm revealing mine by refusing to be part of this circus anymore. The actor reached down and ripped the microphone off his jacket. Not gently. He tore it off with force and threw it down on Jimmy's desk. The sound echoed through the studio like a gunshot. People jumped in their seats. The band members looked at each other in shock. This was really happening. I'm done, Stallone said, his voice final. I'm done with you. I'm done with this show. And I'm done with this whole fake, plastic, disrespectful culture that you represent. You can make all the jokes you want after I leave. You can try to spin this however you want. But everyone in this studio and everyone watching at home knows the truth. They know you went too far. They know you disrespected me. And they know I had the balls to stand up and call you out on it. Jimmy stood there frozen, his face pale. This is live television, Sly. You can't just walk off. Watch me, Stallone said. And he turned toward the exit. The audience erupted in confused noise. Some people gasped. Others shouted. A few tried to applaud but stopped when they realized nobody else was joining them. Jimmy called after him desperately. Sly, wait, please, just... Stallone stopped and turned back one last time. His face was set in stone. You know what the difference is between me and you, Jimmy? I built my career on making people feel strong, feel powerful, feel like they could overcome anything. You've built yours on making people feel small. Think about that. With those final words, Sylvester Stallone walked off the stage. His footsteps echoed through the silent studio. Security scrambled to follow him. Producers rushed around frantically. Jimmy stood behind his desk looking absolutely devastated. The cameras didn't cut away. They kept filming every second of this disaster. You could hear Stallone backstage. His voice carried through the studio. Get out of my way, he shouted at someone. I said move. There was the sound of shuffling, of people scrambling to get out of his path. A producer tried to intercept him. Mr. Stallone, please, if we could just talk for a minute. Talk? Stallone's voice boomed through the backstage area, loud enough for the studio audience to hear. I'm done talking. I came here to talk and got ambushed instead. Now get the hell out of my way before I move you myself. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't an actor playing tough. This was a man who had reached his absolute limit. You could hear more scuffling, more voices trying to calm him down. But Stallone wasn't having any of it. Jimmy stood at his desk, his face pale, trying to figure out what to do. A commercial break would give them time to regroup, but the damage was already done. The audience had heard everything. America had heard everything. There was no taking this back, no spin that would make this okay. Someone in the audience shouted, "Let him go!" It was unclear if they were supporting Stallone or just wanted to see what would happen next. Other audience members murmured in agreement. The energy in the room had completely shifted. What started as Jimmy's show had become Stallone's moment of truth, and people were siding with the legend. This is insane, Jimmy muttered into his microphone, not realizing it was still hot. This is absolutely insane. His bandleader looked at him with concern. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this disaster. This would be clipped, shared, analyzed, and discussed for weeks, maybe months. Jimmy knew it. Everyone knew it. Backstage, Stallone's tirade continued. 50 years, they heard him shout. 50 years I've been doing this, and I've never been treated this disrespectfully. Never. That guy thinks he's clever. He thinks he's funny. He's just a punk with a microphone who doesn't know the first thing about respect. A security guard tried to calm him down. Sir, please, let's just step outside and... I am stepping outside, Stallone shot back. That's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm never coming back. You tell Jimmy Kimmel that Sylvester Stallone will never set foot on his stage again. Not for $1 million, not for anything. He burned that bridge tonight, and there's no rebuilding it. The audience could hear every word. Jimmy slumped in his chair. This was a nightmare. One of the biggest stars in Hollywood history had just declared war on him on live television. How do you come back from that? How do you explain this to your bosses, your sponsors, your viewers? Another voice backstage, maybe a stage manager, tried reasoning with Stallone. We understand you're upset, but if you could just give us a moment. I've given you enough moments, Stallone said. I gave you my time. I gave you my courtesy. I came here as a professional, and your host treated me like garbage. So no, I'm not giving you another damn second. I'm leaving, and you're going to let me leave, or this is going to get a lot worse. The threat hung in the air. Everyone in the studio, from the crew to the audience to Jimmy himself, understood that Stallone meant business. This wasn't bluster. This wasn't acting. This was a man defending his dignity, and he was prepared to do whatever it took. Jimmy finally found his voice again. Ladies and gentlemen, he said into the microphone, trying to salvage something from this wreckage, I think we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll have our next guest and... Coward, someone in the audience said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. You pushed him too far, Jimmy. Other audience members nodded or murmured agreement. This was unprecedented. The audience was turning against the host. They'd watched him bully a guest, watched that guest stand up for himself, and now they were making their feelings known. Jimmy looked out at them, seeing the judgment in their eyes, and for once in his career, he had no witty comeback. Backstage, there was the sound of a door being thrown open with tremendous force. Stallone's voice echoed one last time through the building. Tell Jimmy I said he should learn the difference between comedy and cruelty. Maybe then, he'll actually deserve the platform he's been given. Then came the final slam. The exit door crashing shut with such violence that the walls shook. Equipment rattled. People jumped. And then, silence. Sylvester Stallone was gone, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces and a host whose reputation had just taken a massive hit. The audience sat in stunned silence. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real. This was raw. This was a legendary actor having enough and drawing a line in the sand. Some people pulled out their phones, filming the aftermath, capturing Jimmy's defeated expression and the chaos of the crew trying to figure out what to do next. Jimmy tried to speak into his microphone, but his voice cracked. We'll be right back after this break, he managed to say, but there was no conviction in his words. He sounded broken, defeated, like a man who knew he'd just made a career-defining mistake. As the show cut to commercial, you could see Jimmy put his head in his hands. His producers rushed the stage, surrounding him, probably trying to figure out damage control. But what could they do? The whole world had just watched Jimmy Kimmel drive away one of Hollywood's most respected figures. The whole world had watched Stallone call him out for being a bully. The whole world had witnessed what happens when you push a legend too far. In the audience, people were buzzing with excitement and shock. They'd come for a regular night of comedy and celebrity interviews. Instead, they'd witnessed history. They'd seen a confrontation that would be talked about for years. They'd watched a man stand up for himself in the most spectacular way possible. The camera operators looked at each other, unsure what to do. Do they keep filming? Do they shut down? The director was probably having a meltdown in the control room. This was every producer's worst nightmare, and every viewer's dream drama. Outside the studio, Stallone climbed into his car. According to crew members who saw him leave, his face was still red with anger, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. He'd just done something most celebrities would never dare. He'd rejected the entire system. He'd said no to playing nice. He'd walked away from millions of dollars worth of publicity for his film because his dignity mattered more. Back in the studio, as the commercial break ended, Jimmy returned to his desk. His next guest sat down, but the interview was awkward and stilted. How could it not be? Everyone's mind was still on what had just happened. The guest tried to make jokes, tried to lighten the mood, but it was impossible. The elephant in the room was too big, too present, too overwhelming. Jimmy went through the motions of finishing the show, but his heart wasn't in it. His usual energy was gone. His quick wit had abandoned him. He was just a man trying to get through the rest of his broadcast after experiencing one of the most humiliating moments of his career. When the show finally ended, when the cameras finally stopped rolling, Jimmy sat alone at his desk. The audience had left. The crew was packing up equipment. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Sylvester Stallone was probably still fuming, replaying the confrontation in his mind, but satisfied that he'd stood his ground. The heavy door that Stallone had slammed remained closed, a physical barrier that represented the burned bridge between these two men. The legend was gone, but the impact of those explosive minutes would last far longer than anyone in that studio could have imagined. Hollywood had witnessed something rare, a star saying, "Enough is enough," and backing it up by walking away from one of the biggest platforms in entertainment. This wasn't just a bad interview. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. This was a statement, a line drawn in the sand, a message sent to every talk show host who thinks disrespect is the same as entertainment. Sylvester Stallone had just reminded everyone that legends don't have to play by anyone's rules but their own. And if you push them too far, they'll walk away and leave you with nothing but regret and a viral video that will haunt you forever.